Thank you. So I'm Jennifer Leggett at Heolddu, and this is just giving you an indication of an etymology Latin root word project that I started last year, and I've moved on from this year where I'm expanding this across the school as part of an inquiry partnership project. But this is just giving an overview of what I did last year to get the ball rolling, and it's quite nice. I think some elements of it click over with the vocabulous work earlier on. So in terms of the intent, I apologise if you've been involved in the etymology groups. You might recognise a couple of elements here. So within the AOLEs, there's obviously two main areas or concepts that support etymology. So languages connect us, and understanding languages is the key to understanding the world around us. So obviously we want to make sure that I'm bringing the pupils in line with that. And there's obviously a range of different ways that there are links within Curriculum for Wales. This is obviously taken from Ellie Bristow, which I'll refer to in a moment. So there's lots of different ways within the Curriculum for Wales where we can build in these links, where etymology can be the mechanism that we're using in order to expand pupils' reading and understanding. So the research by Ellie Bristow, who's a linguist at Cardiff University, explored the role of etymology in GCSE English Lit and Lang papers. Now, for those of you on the etymology project, you're obviously fully aware of Ellie Bristow, and lots of us were at the conference as well in the summer term. So she'd used the Oxford English Dictionary, and she found that 71.4% of the words were Romance language origin, Latin, 16.4 Germanic, 4.4 ancient Greek, and 7.8% unknown, which is probably sort of our Hindi words and so on. So she was keen to stress that although English is a Germanic language, many of the sounds and the roots that we use are Latin. So that made it make sense for me to be trying to use this information to support the pupils in our school. So I wanted to look at how can use the use of strategies to teach etymology support progression in reading skills. And this year I'm expanding this across greater numbers of classes. So I initially did this as a very, very small test last year to see what happened. So the implementation last year was based on the trial in one year 8 class. But this year I'm expanding it across a large number of classes and trying to get other members of staff involved and upskilling them as well. So it was a year 8 class, and what I did initially was I had an entry G form survey, and that I gave to the whole class before I did anything. So I actually started this with one of my classes this year, did this yesterday, and they were a top set class, so they were all getting really anxious. I don't know what it means. I don't know what to put. And I'm going to know. I don't want you to know because I need to teach you. And then we can see the progress. So we literally did it completely and utterly raw. And then at the end of the little project, I've got an exit G form that the whole class did, and it literally takes about 10 minutes. Some elements of the G form are from Ellie Bristow's questions, which I'll show you now. And then towards the end, it was asking in terms of ranking confidence in identifying Latin roots and seeing the connections. So that was my entry and exit point for data. These questions here, I keep referencing Ellie Bristow, so I'm utilising what she's done. I haven't created these questions. So she had parts, word parts of dict. Can you write as many words that contain that word part? Then looking at the previous question, how are the meanings of all these words connected? And then the next group then is on ject. How many words can they think of, and can they work out the connections between these words? And obviously at the beginning the answer was no, which we're going to look at some of the results. And the exit test had the same structure, but it was with unfamiliar roots. So it was roots that weren't in the entry test, and they weren't in the teaching elements that I was doing, just to make sure I've got accurate data. And then at the end of the entry and the exit, they had the same ranking. So how confident did they feel identifying Latin root words and extracting the meanings of the Latin root words? So just a 1 to 10 scale to check for progress and how they were feeling about what they were doing. So this year I'm expanding it to include targeted 6 pupils. I'm actually doing 8 because 2 may not be in. We all have a couple of extras in the sort of teaching climate we're in at the minute. I'm doing listening to learners, a book look where I'm specifically looking for vocabulary, what's already happening, before any explicit teaching is done. Then during part of the process, I'm going to go in and do short film clips in a couple of the lessons with the other members of staff. They're absolutely fine doing this because we do lots of team coaching. So all our observations are done through walkthroughs and team-based coaching. We don't have lesson observations. So staff are really used to doing film clips of their own lessons, or somebody coming in and taking 5-10 minute clips. And then at the end, I'm going to go back to my same targeted pupils and do the same listening to learners book look, and seeing how they are after the explicit teaching. So I'm expanding it in terms of size this year. So the project was over 10 sessions as opposed to 10 lessons. So 2 sessions covered Ellie's information on language groups and constructing and understanding an English language timeline. Now these first 2 were 2 whole lessons because putting things in chronological order seems to be a huge issue with pupils. So this actually did take 2 full complete lessons where I gave them the timeline dates. They had to get those in order first of all, so that was a bit of a challenge across the middle of the page. Then they're given all the different boxes all cut and muddled up, and then they've got to use their prior knowledge to work out if they can put where those different elements of history happen. Some they did get, some they'd remembered, lots they were just guessing. So there's lots and lots of discussion about that, and then obviously they put in a correct version at the end. But a lot of the pupils, as we've said before in earlier meetings, they're absolutely fascinated by the history and how that links across and the development of these different, they don't seem to have any concept of invasion groups coming into the UK. And again, I don't know that's a setting because I went to school in England where you do the whole of Britain, whereas I teach in Wales and there seems to be a bit of a disparity in terms of the history and what they actually cover. So I've noticed that in quite a lot of things. So, but a lot of them were really interested in, oh my gosh, we've had different groups of people in. It's not just the same people all the time. So that was interesting that way as well. And then there were 8 sessions exploring the Latin roots using Ellie's caterpillar idea. So a blank caterpillar is given to each pupil at the start of each lesson, and then it's really important there's a backup one. So clearly I am not a Latin specialist, so I am a bit of a control freak. So I like to have a version behind the scenes where if I'm stuck, I can just refer to that if I'm going to get lost. And then gradually over the 8 sessions, I moved from I do to we do to you do. So the first of the 8 sessions probably took about 20 minutes, maybe 25. But then as you go through the 8 sessions, it gets quicker and quicker and quicker because the pupils know what they're doing. So you can get it down to about 10, 12 minutes, something like that. So I obviously use this caterpillar that we're familiar with, and this is what the pupils had. And I've got the link to the Etym online that we know is our holy grail of where we're all going for our etymology stuff. So the link is on everything in case anybody needs it in an emergency. So then this is one of my backup slides for a session. So this is the following through with Ellie's system where you start with the Latin root, which obviously this one I've got is sent. This initial one is her modelled one she did in the etymology workshops. Obviously there's a group of words in the second part of the caterpillar, but I have to hit the word that's in bold because I need to get to the word or the root grade to then jump into retrograde, to get to retro, to get to retrospect. So what happened in a lot of these sessions were that there's lots of discussion, lots of ideas from the pupils. So we just had this on the board with the pupils. They populated, I allowed them to see the first bit with the first root and what it meant. Then there was lots of classroom discussion. Oh, I know this links to this, this links to that. And we just pull it all onto the white interactive board. And then either the word I'm looking for had come up for me, because otherwise I'm going to be stuck, or I had to go, okay, let's add this one as well, because I need to know that I can do the jumps. So that's how it worked, just bit by bit revealing it. But they came up with quite a lot of words. Sometimes they came up with words that wasn't to do with the root. And Ellie had obviously said to be aware there are some that don't fit. So it was toing and froing, lots of discussion with the pupils, but I knew that regardless of the other words in each circle, I had to make sure I'd got that one. And the pupils, at the end of the first session, had a complete copy like this. So they had the arrows with what the Latin root was, and they may have had different other words in each circle, depending on what we discussed. But these are some backup words in addition to the ones that they may have done. So then that system, I followed through in another up to session 6. So I've got a back of 6 groups of words that we can be teaching over the 6 sessions, but the pupils have got the same familiar caterpillar each time, and we're just gradually, with support, working through to the end of the caterpillar. And then what I did was in session 7, we talked about this in the etymology project as well, is I got the pupils to use Etym Online, although it's not a child-focused website, but with support, I got them to research words and the Latin roots, but they only completed circles 3 and 4 on the caterpillars. I helped them with 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, the pupils would have different things depending what they'd found with their partner. And then in the session 8, I did the first circle with them, and they then populated independently circles 2, 3, and 4. And then obviously we could have a big classroom discussion because they'd split into many, many different areas they'd gone to by finding the connections in the Latin roots. So they were really surprised, a lot of them, with that. So then in terms of impact, I had the entry data. So for question 1 on dict, I've made this, this is all the results, but I basically bolded the key ones you need to look at. So this is the entry data. So for dict, in my class, 24 were saying dictionary and then a smattering of other words, but not much range. In question 2, how are they connected? Well, 20 of them just went, I don't know. They've got no idea for the words they put, no idea how they're linked at all. And then same here with ject. So 15 out of the, I think there's 32 in the class, 15 got reject. Again, some smattering of other words, some with eject, but not a great range. And again, 10 out of the class, the highest, if they've just got no idea how those words link. There's no interconnection at all. 5 was, was rupt. So again, I've got erupt, and eruption here is high. But again, how are they linked? 13, by far the highest. They've got no idea what the link is. So they're not identifying the meaning. And as we were talking about earlier in vocabulus, if you've got the root, you can expand it into so many words. So instead of trying to just learn individual words, you can then learn a whole group of spellings together, or a whole group of words that have a similar meaning. So it's a really quick way of expanding their understanding of vocabulary. And then we had here for 7, the highest by far was percent, from the root of cent. And again, 17 have no idea how the words they suggested linked. And then the exit data here, we then got aqua. I gave them here. So we had aquatic, aquarium, aquamarine. So we've got a greater range. And 19 have managed to say, we think it's to do with water. And all of these roots in the exit testing haven't been taught in the caterpillars. So they're completely new. Question 3 was port. So I've got things like airport and import. And here I've got 11 are saying is something to do with travel. And I have got, there's 8 there to carry something. So they're sort of on the right lines there, as that's the same route she was talking about. 5 was sense. So I've got the biggest of sense, or I've got sensation. 15, they all have something to do with being aware. And you know, 5 have got I don't know. You're always going to get some I don't know, but that was a pretty high that they're trying to, they've worked out the route from that. And scrib, she had there. We've got scribble was by far the biggest, and 10 in the answer have got, oh, it's to write. So they're working out the connection to the answers they put in the first one, which is what we're wanting them to do. So if they're reading a text and there's an unfamiliar word, they can unpick the meaning. They can have a stab at comprehending the text because they're not stuck on that one unfamiliar word that they're not sure of. And then if they're trying to write, it opens up a greater range of ambitious vocabulary that they can access, because they can think, oh, I want that word. You know, it doesn't necessarily be a synonym, but they think, oh yeah, I know that root word is to do with this, so I could use something. And then in terms of entry and exit and question 9, this is how confident you feel. So on entry here, the biggest one I've got is about 5. By the end, I've got the majority up to 9. They're feeling really confident to give it a go, which is what we want. And then here is how confident in independently finding the meanings. So at the start, we've got 1, which fits the result. They've got absolutely no idea. But in the exit, I've got that it's 6, and we've got some 8s here as well. But 1 to 6, that's a great move in terms of being able to work out from unfamiliar words, what do we think that the link might be by using other words that might be familiar to us with that root word in. So based on that, when you try something, you're like, I'm not sure how this is going to go, but I'm going to give it a whirl. The data came out really, really positively from those short sessions. And that's why I'm then looking at expanding that this year. And it didn't involve too much class time. It was quite an intense block, 2 full lessons, and then lessons that were sort of 20 sessions at 25 minutes, and then reducing as it went on. So it was quite a lot of gain relative to the amount of lesson time you had to use doing it. And I'm sure it could be expanded. Maybe it could be expanded into science, maybe using Greek root words. So there's other ways that that could be expanded to other subjects. But I'm sort of moving forward on smaller steps first place.